Welcome to Bite at a Time Books, where we read you your favorite classics one bite at a time. My name is Bree Carlile, and I love to read and wanted to share my passion with listeners like you. You can sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. You'll also find our new t-shirts in the shop, including podcast shirts and quote shirts from your favorite classic novels. Be sure to follow my show on your favorite podcast platform so you get all the new episodes. We're part of the Bite at a Time Books Productions Network. If you'd also like to hear what inspired your favorite classic author to write their novels, and what was going on in the world at the time, check out the Bite at a Time Books Behind the Story podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Today we'll be continuing Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Book 12, Corinth. Chapter 1. History of Corinth from its foundation. The Parisians who nowadays, on entering on the Rue Rambuteau, at the end near the Halles, notice on their right, opposite the Rue Mondétour, a basket-maker's shop, having for its sign a basket in the form of Napoleon the Great with this inscription, "Napoleon is made wholly of willow," have no suspicion of the terrible scenes which this very spot witnessed hardly 30 years ago. It was there that lay the Rue de la Chevrerie, which ancient deeds spell Chenverie, and the celebrated public house called Corinth. The reader will remember all that has been said about the barricade effected at this point, and eclipsed, by the way, by the barricade St. Mary. It was on this famous barricade of the Rue de la Chevrerie, now fallen into profound obscurity, that we are about to shed a little light. May we be permitted to recur, for the sake of clearness in the recital, to the simple means which we have already employed in the case of Waterloo. Persons who wish to picture to themselves in a tolerably exact manner the constitution of the houses which stood at that epoch near the Point Saint-Eustache, at the northeast angle of the House of Paris, where today lies the embouchure of the Rue Rambuteau, have only to imagine an N touching the Rue Saint-Denis, with its summit, and the Halles with its base, and whose two vertical bars should form the Rue de la Grande Truanderie, and the Rue de la Chevrerie, and whose transverse bar should be formed in the Rue de la Petite Truanderie. The old Rue Mondétour cut the three strokes of the N at the most crooked angles, so that the labyrinthine confusion of these four streets sufficed to form on a space 3 fathoms square between the Halles and the Rue Saint-Denis on the one hand, and between the Rue du Cygne and the Rue des Prêcheurs on the other. 7 islands of houses, oddly cut up, of varying sizes, placed crosswise and haphazard, and barely separated, like the blocks of stone in a dock, by narrow crannies. We say narrow crannies, and we can give no more just idea of those dark, contracted, many-angled alleys lined with 8-story buildings. These buildings were so decrepit that in the Rue de la Chevrerie and the Rue de la Petite Truanderie, the fronts were shored up with beams running from one house to another. The street was narrow and the gutter broad. The pedestrian there walked on a pavement that was always wet, skirting little stalls resembling cellars, big posts encircled with iron hoops, excessive heaps of refuse, and gates armed with enormous century-old gratings. The Rue Rambuteau has devastated all that. The name of Mondétour paints marvelously well the sinuosities of that whole set of streets. A little further on, they are found still better expressed by the Rue Pirouette, which ran into the Rue Mondétour. The passer-by who got entangled from the Rue Saint-Denis and the Rue de la Chevrerie beheld it gradually close in before him, as though he had entered an elongated funnel. At the end of this street, which was very short, he found further passage barred in the direction of the Halles by a tall row of houses, and he would have thought himself in a blind alley, had he not perceived on the right and left 2 dark cuts through which he could make his escape. This was the Rue Mondétour, which on one side ran in the Rue des Prêcheurs, and on the other into the Rue du Cygne and the Petite Truanderie. At the bottom of this sort of cul-de-sac, at the angle of the cutting on the right, there was to be seen a house which was not so tall as the rest, and which formed a sort of cape in the street. It is in this house of 2 stories only that an illustrious wine shop has been merrily installed 300 years before. This tavern created a joyous noise in the very spot which old Theophilus described in the following couplet: La brunle le squatlet horrible. Neon pauvre, emet kis and petit. The situation was good, and tavern keepers succeeded each other there, from father to son. In the time of Mathurin Regnier, this cabaret was called the Pois Roses, and as the ribus was then in fashion, it had for its signboard a post, poteau, painted rose color. In the last century, the worthy Natur, one of the fantastic masters nowadays, despised by the stiff school, having got drunk many times in this wine shop at the very table where Regnier had drunk his fill, had painted, by way of gratitude, a bunch of Corinth grapes on the pink post. The keeper of the cabaret, in his joy, had changed his device, and had caused to be placed in gilt letters beneath the bunch these words, "At the bunch of Corinth grapes, a raisin de Corinth." Hence the name of Corinth. Nothing is more natural to drunken men than ellipses. The ellipses is the zigzag of the phrase. Corinth gradually dethroned the pot et roses. The last proprietor of the dynasty, Father Hushloop, no longer acquainted even with the tradition, had the post painted blue. A room on the ground floor where the bar was situated, one on the first floor containing a billiard table, a wooden spiral staircase piercing the ceiling, wine on the tables, smoke on the walls, candles in broad daylight. This was the style of this cabaret. A staircase with a trap door in the lower room led to the cellar. On the second floor were the lodgings of the Huchelot family. They were reached by a staircase, which was a ladder rather than a staircase, and had for their entrance only a private door in the large room on the first floor. Under the roof, in two mansard attics, were the nests for the servants. The kitchen shared the ground floor with the tap room. Father Huchelot had perhaps been born a chemist, but the fact is that he was a cook. People did not confine themselves to drinking alone in his wine shop. They also ate there. Huchelot had invented a capital thing which could be eaten nowhere but in his house, stuffed carps, which he called carps au gras. These were eaten by the light of a tallow candle, or of a lamp of the time of Louis XVI, on tables to which were nailed wax cloths in lieu of tablecloths. People came from thither from a distance. Huchelot, one fine morning, had seen fit to notify passers-by of this specialty. He had dipped a brush in a pot of black paint, and as he was an orthographer on his own account, as well as a cook after his own fashion, he had improvised on his wall this remarkable inscription: Carps au gras. One winter, the rainstorms and the showers had taken a fancy to obliterate the S, which terminated the first word, and the G, which began the third. This is what remained: carp au gras. Time and rain assisting, a humble gastronomical announcement had become a profound piece of advice. In this way it came about that though he knew no French, Father Huchelot understood Latin, that he had evoked philosophy from his kitchen, and that desirous simply of effacing Lent, he had equaled Horace. And the striking thing about it was that that also meant enter my wine shop. Nothing of all this is in existence now. The Mondétour labyrinth was disemboweled and widely opened in 1847, and probably no longer exists at the present moment. The Rue de la Chanvrerie and Corinth have disappeared beneath the pavement of the Rue Rambuteau. As we've already said, Corinth was the meeting place, if not the rallying point, of Courfeyrac and his friends. It was Grantaire who had discovered Corinth. He had entered it on account of the carp Horace, and had returned thither on account of the carp au gras. There they drank. There they ate. There they shouted. They did not pay much. They paid badly. They did not pay at all, but they were always welcome. Father Huchelot was a jovial host. Huchelot, that amiable man, as was just said, was a wine shop keeper with a mustache, an amusing variety. He always had an ill-tempered air, seemed to wish to intimidate his customers, grumbled at people who entered his establishment, and had rather the mien of seeking a quarrel with them than of serving them with soup. And yet we insist upon the word. People were always welcome there. This oddity had attracted customers to his shop, and brought him young men who said to each other, "Come here, Father Huchelot growl." He had been a fencing master. All of a sudden, he would burst out laughing. A big voice, a good fellow. He had a comic foundation under a tragic exterior. He asked nothing better than to frighten you, very much like those snuff boxes, which are in the shape of a pistol. The detonation makes one sneeze. Mother Hucheloup, his wife, was a bearded and very homely creature. About 1830, Father Hucheloup died. With him disappeared the secret of stuffed carps. His inconsolable widow continued to keep the wine shop, but the cooking deteriorated and became execrable. The wine, which had always been bad, became fearfully bad. Nevertheless, Courfeyrac and his friends continued to go to Corinth, out of pity, as Bossuet said. The widow Hucheloup was breathless and misshapen and given to rustic recollections. She deprived them of their flatness by her pronunciation. She had a way of her own of saying things which spiced her reminiscences of the village and of her springtime. It had formerly been her delight, so she affirmed, to hear the Loup des Gorges, Rogues' Gorges, Chanterdens les Agrippins, Aubepins, to hear the red breasts sing in the hawthorn trees. The hall on the first floor, where the restaurant was situated, was a large and long apartment encumbered with stools, chairs, benches, and tables, and with a crippled, lame old billiard table. It was reached by a spiral staircase, which terminated in the corner of the room at a square hole like the hatchway of a ship. This room, lighted by a single narrow window, and by a lamp that was always burning, had the air of a garret. All the four-footed furniture comported itself as though it had but 3 legs. The whitewashed walls had for their only ornament the following quatrain in honor of Meme Hucheloup. Elle étonne et dit pas, elle habiterait à deux. Un vrai habit en son nez hasardeux. Un tremble à chaque coup, instant quel ne vole la mouche. Et qu'un bout, jour son nez, ne tombe, ne se bouche. This was scrawled in charcoal on the wall. Mame Hucheloup, a good likeness, went and came from morning till night, before this quatrain with the most perfect tranquillity. 2 serving maids, named Matelote and Gibelotte, and who had never been known by any other names, helped Mame Hucheloup to set on the tables the jugs of poor wine and the various broths which were served to the hungry patrons in earthenware bowls. Matelote, large, plump, red-haired, and noisy, the favorite ex-sultana of the defunct Hucheloup, was homelier than any mythological monster, be it what it may. Still, as it becomes a servant to always keep in the rear of the mistress, she was less homely than Mame Hucheloup. Gibelotte, tall, delicate, white, with a lymphatic pallor, with circles round her eyes and drooping lids, always languid and weary, afflicted with what may be called chronic lassitude, the first up in the house and the last in bed, waited on everyone, even the other maid, silently and gently, smiling through her fatigue with a vague and sleepy smile. Before entering the restaurant room, the visitor read on the door the following line written there in chalk by Courfeyrac: Régale si tu peux, et mange si tu l'oses. Thank you for joining Bite at a Time Books today, while we read a bite of one of your favorite classics. Again, my name is Bree Carlile, and I hope you come back tomorrow for the next bite of Les Miserables. Don't forget, you can sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. And while you're there, check out our t-shirt shop. You can look in the show notes or on our website, biteatatimebooks.com, for the rest of the links for our show. We'd love to hear from you on social media. You can find us everywhere at Bite at a Time Books.